What is that?
Adam's apple reduction.
Yes, 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 yes!
Emilia Perez is an Oscar-darling narco musical that asks, what if we took a gritty crime thriller about a Mexican drug lord and turned it into a progressive fever dream set to music about gender identity that unfolds as a glittering and garish tour de force of terrible ideas, terribly executed, full of outlandish plot contrivances and confused moral bombast. It follows a ruthless and terrifying drug kingpin who has consolidated power by annihilating competitors and buying off politicians, who then decides to undergo gender transition and start a new life as a woman. The character wants the hairs taken off his chest, but watching this will certainly put the hairs on yours. It's the precise sort of preening cinematic masturbation that Hollywood types like to think of as visionary, though the film itself doesn't seem to know what it wants to be about. The director actually has the brass balls to title himself Renegade Auteur. If this all sounds both cringeworthy and even offensive, you're probably the sort of person who watches Echo Chamberlain videos. Although from now on I wish to be referred to as Outlaw Iconoclast Echo Chamberlain. In one scene, the medical names of all the various procedures are chant-sung. I might as well show you the toe-curling, genuinely baffling, makes you worried for society and the human condition, hilarious clip that's doing the rounds, to give you a sense of what we're contending with here.
I'd like to know about sex change operation.
I see. To woman, a woman, to men.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina.
Musicals can be great when they're, designed to be musicals. The real-life narco-culture context is gritty and unsparing. Death, incarceration, brutality, gothic violence, and despair. And having that as your template, from which there springs forth musical numbers, is mind-blowingly absurd. The opening scene looks like something from The Big Lebowski. Nearly every song feels like a phoned-in mashup of cliches. In the first big song and dance number, a character leads a mass chorus of impoverished and brutalized Mexicans through a fake Mexico City on a soundstage in France, hollering lines about the country's misery, while people around her are literally stabbing each other to death in the streets. It's hard to envisage a more ill-suited and ill-starred genre pairing than musical and narco thriller. You could probably get better mileage out of other atrocious pairings. How about Christian faith-based / cosmic horror? Jesus vs. Cthulhu, The Final Redemption. Or Hallmark Christmas / cyberpunk dystopia, mistletoe and megacorporations. And yet, somehow, Emilia Perez exists as a musical thriller, described elsewhere as a French musical crime comedy, which sounds like if Truffaut tried to do a Hitchcock film and enlisted Parisian synth-pop duo Air to do the soundtrack.
Lady, will you please tell your Mr. Mystery instead of having plastic surgery?
Doctor.
Cause a doctor.
Doctor.
I said, doctor, to relieve this flipper ache. I said, doctor.
The film's hyperactive pursuit of the "you've never seen anything like it" blurb has led many to describe the film as genre-defying. The film is not so much ripping up the rulebook as using the rulebook as a lavatory paper substitute after a hot gushing spray of diarrhea. However, because we live in the cultural end times, this tonal Frankenstein's monster is up for 13 Oscars, making it now tied with the following films as the second most nominated films at the Oscars: Oppenheimer, Mary Poppins, Forrest Gump, Gone with the Wind, Lord of the Rings, Fellowship of the Ring. A film about cartels would be visceral and thrilling, full of kinetic action, suspense, moral debasement, and even moral quandaries. A film about trans themes, such as The Danish Girl or Transamerica, might, irrespective of your hardline or shifting or sympathetic perspectives, elicit emotive responses as a drama with human compassion and themes of self-autonomy at their core. But a film combining vicious cartel hierarchies and gothic violence, then transitioning, in a contextual sense, to transitioning in a literal sense, is trying to encompass too much and straining to work in too many contemporary ideas. Because a cartel life so fraught, so possibly short-lived, so redolent of contemporary issues, and such an obscure yet massively compelling and controversial sphere deserves full attention of a full-length feature, as does, for similar reasons, a trans journey of inner struggle, conception of self, societal and economic considerations, drama of transition itself, and the aftermath. Mushing both of these things into one feature and the overwrought, gritted jaw aesthetic of this film is like putting a Vietnam veteran newly arrived home to a skeptical America and dealing with issues of PTSD and finding purpose, and welding that to a further narrative of him becoming a pop singer who contends with anorexia and bulimia. Or a narrative about an ex-CIA rogue agent who will then go on to be the prospective first recipient of a baboon heart transplant. To facilitate this transformation, Manitas enlists the help of Rita Mora Castro, an overworked lawyer portrayed by Zoe Saldana. Because when you're a feared crime lord responsible for untold violence, the first person you call for life-changing surgery is your legal advisor? Rita has to fake Manita's death and arrange for the erstwhile narco-trafficker's wife, Selena Gomez, and children to be surreptitiously relocated to Switzerland. All of this somehow happens within the movie's first 40 minutes. The remainder of the film deals with Emilia's attempted reunion with her children, who, after 4 years in Switzerland, are somehow persuaded to move back in with Emilia in Mexico under the ruse that she is their deceased father's distant cousin. Zoe Saldana is a solid actress and does her best, and Carla Sofia Gasson, playing the titular Emilia Perez, has a solid screen presence, but it's wasted talent. In one scene, Saldana literally breaks the fourth wall to say to the viewing masses, "I will never let you down." After faking his death and transitioning into Emilia, Manitas attempts to start anew. However, leaving behind a life of crime proves challenging. Emilia grapples with her past deeds and seeks redemption by establishing a non-profit organization aimed at identifying the victims of cartel violence. The narrative tries to intertwine themes of identity, transformation, and atonement, all set against the backdrop of a musical odyssey. I think I could develop a narrative that intertwines themes of identity, transformation, and atonement, all set against the backdrop of a musical odyssey. How about My Fair Metalhead? A pretentious opera critic is cursed to become the frontman of a heavy metal band. As he transforms into a screaming, leather-clad beast, he learns that metal and opera share more than he thought. His redemption arc culminates in the ultimate crossover. Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries meets deathcore, forcing the world to acknowledge the beauty of brutal riffs. Or Atonal Atonement. A young white male pianist is horrified to discover that all Western music is built on the remnants of oppressive power structures. Swearing off harmony as an act of resistance, he embarks on a journey to create the first fully ethical song, one devoid of rhythm, melody, and structure. But when he accidentally composes a banger, he repents by writing a rock opera that deconstructs itself in real time. Hilariously enough, the film has faced criticism from all sides. Mexican viewers have decried the film's sensationalist and deeply retrograde depiction of their country as a violence-ridden failed state. None of the film's stars were born in Mexico, and almost none of the movie was shot in Mexico. Meanwhile, LGBT voices have criticized the film's ham-handed depiction of gender transition, decrying the film as a profoundly retrograde portrayal of a trans woman. Brilliant. It creates a contrived, overly expansive, achingly self-congratulatory contemporary premise and blunders in its efforts to lend authenticity and perspective to both. Let's just pause to do a checklist here. Trans rights. Strong female character. Moral relativism about someone irredeemable changing their ways. Musical numbers that sound pat, lacking in the melodic charm and originality of yesteryear, and are instantly forgettable. Touchy, almost impossible to satisfy, activist response. Depicted culture, irate at how it has been depicted by do-good film auteurs and progressive scriptwriters. Button-nosed, petite, cupcake, diverse female pop singer trying to reinvent herself as hard-edged with gravitas in a serious drama. Oscar-darling picture that the vast wider culture has scarcely heard of, thinks sounds dubious, hasn't turned out to watch, leading to a vast disconnect between Hollywood heedless sanctimony and mainstream relatability. and a wider disconnect between the Oscars as a celebration of film's impact on the culture, when the film it is most drooling over and extolling has utterly failed to capture public attention, let alone the public imagination, let alone have any organic cultural impact. All checks. This is the thing. Emilia Perez, being developed over the last year, represents the high noon of identity politics sanctimony, hitting at a time that is also the high noon of a restored conservative political reaction. These opposing dynamics have placed us in the midst of a nasty situation where cultural elites are throwing a last wild swooping haymaker before the final bell. The cultural landscape has shifted under Hollywood's feet in the last few months, but they are stubbornly, priggishly ignoring this. And so Emilia Perez, and its 13 nominations, comes across as both a cringeworthy ignoring of reality and a cringeworthy active defiance of reality, all kind of writhing together. Analogous to this, or at the heart of it, is the institutional counterbalancing away from the disproportionate, flaky, and strident excesses of trans ideology. This started with the BBC Tavistock inquiry and peaked with the Comprehensive Cass report, overseen by esteemed UK paediatrician Hilary Cass, whose substantive and defining study with the largest cohorts found that while a small subset of the population did experience and might find alleviation from gender dysphoria, the majority of young people presenting as such would not need corrective surgery, and that the science and efficacy around puberty blockers was underdeveloped. Crucially, this wasn't snaring reactionaries in an echo chamber. This was institutional and punctured the bumptious, high-strung notions of allies who had for a time achieved shaky, nominal favor and socio-cultural default in the culture, but whose activism and boycotts ultimately wore thin.